Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to our next session in MPHA's annual conference. We are pleased to have Andy Pritchard with the Public Health Research Institute and Chief Clarissa Sabattis with the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians joining us for their presentation on the partnership to promote food sovereignty and food security, the Maliseet Food Sovereignty Initiative. Before I turn it over to them, just a couple of quick reminders. You can access closed captioning within the session. If you scroll down, you'll see that. And if you don't need it, you can simply push the pause button. We do encourage you to evaluate each session, and you can do that by clicking the feedback link in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation, so feel free to chat those in the Q&A as we go throughout, and you'll see those pop up. So again, thank you to Andy and Chief Sabattis for being with us this morning, and I will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Heather. I wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to give this presentation. It's been a lot of effort going in a wide range of different projects, all centered around this kind of umbrella concept of food sovereignty. That's been pretty exciting to kind of be a part of. So I'm happy to have the chance to talk about it with Chief Sabattis, and just give a little bit of a background about what this food sovereignty concept is all about, and some kind of tangible strategies for implementing something at the community level, and a little bit about how we've gone about thinking about evaluation, to sort of see how things are going and see where the community is in terms of thinking about these issues. So with that, let's get started. Here's just a quick overview of what we wanted to talk about. Again, so some background about the different initiatives underway, and how they kind of tie in with this concept of food sovereignty. Give a few definition, some examples of food sovereignty, and then talk a little bit about the different activities that are happening, that are addressing different aspects of food sovereignty in the community. And then lastly, wanted to take some time to go over some results from a survey that we did recently of community members, which I think was just an important part of getting a sense of where people are and thinking about these different issues, or their kind of knowledge about kind of traditional approaches to food production, and preparation. So this survey was essentially what you'd call an environmental scan of where the community is in terms of kind of thinking about these different issues. So just for kind of high level background, the Holton Band of Maliseet Indians has been working to implement kind of a wide range of different initiatives focused on access, availability, food security, nutrition education, and information. So a lot of these are kind of classic public health ideas and kind of interventions, but trying to think of them as not just individual pieces, individual things in sort of a silo type environment, but pieces of a whole, pieces of a larger effort to promote this concept, food sovereignty. So yeah, together all of these kind of tie together to create this larger effort. And like I said, we ran a survey a few months ago to get a better understanding of just knowledge and awareness, interest in being involved, in sort of a community participatory sort of framework, and different aspects of, how people gather food, access food, prepare food, store food, just sort of trying to get a better idea of what people are doing around these kinds of issues. So just to talk a little bit about this idea of food sovereignty, it really gets, at a high level, it relates to the idea of local kind of control over the food system, and sort of the ability to have ownership or a stake or control over how food is kind of comes into the community or is produced within the community and how it's distributed, how people who are involved in food production sort of connect essentially to markets, all of the aspects of the food system, which is this huge, in a, kind of the default of how that works is this huge, massive global distribution network. So trying to kind of figure out where the community fits in and how the community can sort of take ownership of that system. This is a definition from the Food Sovereignty Alliance, which is a group that's sort of working on promoting these ideas and coordinating between different communities that are working toward these sorts of goals. And so this definition is something you see in a lot of a lot of the more sort of movement oriented resources, as well as the more sort of academic literature, sort of all reflects this definition. So food sovereignty is the right of people to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and the right to define their own food and agriculture systems. It puts the aspirations and needs of those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of the food system and policies rather than demands of markets and corporations. So that this has more of a movement sort of tone to it, but the concept there is pretty clear. So this sort of movement in that sense, originated around the late 90s, where you can see different organizations related to food access and local sovereignty, or community sovereignty started thinking about the way that food factors in, and it sort of gained traction, like sort of again as a movement, and also in the academic literature around kind of in thinking about how it relates to other concepts like food security and access. So it's sort of been brewing for a while, and it seems like in the last several years has gained more traction. So the focus is really on empowering, and what's happening in terms of what we're talking about is empowering tribal nations to increase food access and availability, and again sort of ties in with a lot of what you would think of as public health, upstream public health sorts of interventions related to these concepts, like social determinants of health and food security, resilience, economic development, environmental sustainability, connection to culture. I mean, so none of these are things that you haven't heard about before. Really, it's just tying them all together and thinking about them as how they fit together to create a larger effort around a bigger concept.
Andy, if I could just add to, this is something that we were planning for, and I had already been in discussions with different partners about how we could start kind of trickling, some of this stuff, these principles in. However, COVID really changed the speed of everything. So we've had to really kind of meld together the planning and action, and make that all fit, because we definitely have seen an increase in food insecurity, as I'm sure everyone knows, since COVID started. So just wanted to add that.
So they talk about the 6 pillars of food sovereignty, sort of the core principles, which are working with nature, localizing the food system, value food providers, food for people, local control, and building knowledge and skills. So some of these things are pretty self-explanatory. Some of them valuing food providers really has to do with looking at who in a local context is producing farm, local producing food, such as local farmers, even people with their own backyard gardens, hunters, fishers, anyone that might be collecting food from the environment in whatever form that takes, and thinking about how what their role is and how that can be sort of honored and paid. If you can connect them to farmers markets or restaurants or grocery stores or even markets outside, in other areas. So it's really thinking about, and those are sort of more policy oriented interventions, whereas working with nature, building skills, those are things that you can imagine how you could build into different initiatives as sort of the part of the core activities of what those different projects are doing. So this has been laid out as kind of the foundational kind of core concepts or values of food sovereignty. The nice thing about this is you usually see it as a list. When you put it into a circle, it looks like an evaluation framework that you might see from CDC or even something like REAIM or these other sorts of evaluation frameworks that are helpful for thinking about what do we want to measure or assess in terms of talking about the impact that these efforts are having. So it's you can imagine how this sort of lends itself to kind of community-based participatory approach to doing some evaluation work around these concepts, where you have these core values. The question is, how do we measure these? What's important to community members involved in this work around understanding how we're making progress, across these specific domains. So it's a useful resource in that way too. Just wanted to think for a minute about, it's very closely related in a lot of ways to food security. So I just to think about what the kind of similarities and differences are. Food security, tends to be focused more on individuals and families. I feel like a lot of the interventions around food security have to do with the kind of community clinical linkage aspect of looking at how practices are screening people or asking patients for questions about their access to food within a kind of social determinant of health kind of screening process, and then connecting those individuals to local food pantries, that kind of thing. Whereas food sovereignty is a little more upstream in the sense that it's focused more at the community level, looking at the capacity to produce food, how that food can get distributed throughout the, to community members. Again, food security is kind of emphasizes access, connecting people to food pantries, those types of interventions, whereas food sovereignty is focused a little bit more on availability, making sure that food can be produced, or that when it's produced, it can sort of make its way into a distribution network through food pantries or farmers markets or other local kind of distribution networks. Again, sort of food security focusing a little bit more on linkages between healthcare systems and food pantries. In a lot of contexts, that's sort of how it becomes sort of operationalized. Whereas food sovereignty is a little bit more of a policy. A lot of the work happens at a policy level in a lot of ways, developing programs to promote sort of community resiliency and food access. So they're not different. I think of food security as sort of an outcome of a food sovereignty initiative. They're closely linked for sure. So Chief Savadas, you can take it away. This is where we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that's going on sort of to promote these concepts.
Okay. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of these, and I will add that we also early on really did a lot of planning, and we hired someone to as an agriculturalist to really be doing some growing when it comes to the community garden, and we partnered with Wabanaki Public Health and some of our other organizations to do family gardens as well. I will speak a little bit about the food pantry. So we did not have one, and when COVID, actually the first week that we closed down due to COVID, I was on the phone quite consistently throughout every day until we established a food pantry. And while I feel like I would like to see this as a last resort, and I would prefer to be able to provide foods that we're growing for our people and for people to be able to grow their own foods. This is definitely something that was a need. We are about to do a ribbon cutting for our new home for our food pantry. Throughout COVID, we've moved it, I think, 4 times. So it just made its last move into its permanent home. And so this is something that's going to be lasting and stay in our community even after this pandemic. If you want to go ahead to the next slide, Andy. So food sovereignty in action. This is just an example of one of the things that we've been doing. So through some of the efforts and through partnership with different departments within our tribal infrastructure, we've been able to harvest foods grown within our community garden, naturally grown traditional foods like fiddleheads, dandelions, and then other vegetables. And those department staff have gotten those things together, provided all of the canning supplies for people that are interested in learning how to do this, and we've actually gone out and delivered on doorsteps for people, and then scheduled these online live classes, and we've had so much engagement, more so than I think we would have prior to COVID, but it's really provided not only that education and building that knowledge, the knowledge and skills to preserve their own foods and to grow their own foods, but it's given them some social interaction during this time when it's really been challenging. I mean, that's at the heart of who we are. We gather, and gathering and food is really something that we do quite regularly, and it's really been difficult not to have that during COVID. So this has helped with that as well. And sorry about all the COVID talking, but I think that it's really pushed this effort along. So if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. So this on the left-hand side is one of our community gardens. We own a lot of farmland that we lease out to farmers here in Aroostook County, and we've taken a few acres out of production to start growing our own foods. And so this is just the smaller parcel of land that we have grown on. This is our second year in that location. And then on the right is just food that's coming out of individual gardens that have gone out to the community. So again, I think that when you look at building knowledge and skills, we have been technical assistance along with some of our partners for people that have received raised beds and seeds, and we've really put out a lot of effort. We have I think just under 100 raised beds in our community. So I mean that's pretty significant number for our size or our numbers. So our agriculturalists, along with some interns that we've been using, some of our own youth from the community working under Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness, have provided a lot of technical assistance along with some of their staff. So this has been a really wonderful effort, and I think that I'm really surprised at how many people were interested. I was a little hesitant at first when we started, so it's really been successful. But this also puts, it localizes the food system and puts, not only is it food for our people, but it localizes that control. So along with all of this, we're developing policies, especially around the community garden, because you need to make sure you have systems in place in order to disseminate, and we're making sure that we're growing organic. So there's a lot. I won't go into the weeds with that, but it's nice to be able to develop our own policies versus versus someone telling us what has to be done. So I'll let you go on to the next, if you would. Okay. So again, just an example, I think of some of the community gardens and the canning classes that have taken place. And I will say that we're also doing cooking classes. So with the canning classes, we've built capacity, within our tribal citizens significantly. And they do like 5-week segments, and then they'll offer another 5 weeks for a different set of people. And it's a fairly good sized class. It lasts an hour and a half or so, 2 hours, and people are able to engage and see each other, and they talk while they're doing their canning classes. So I really do think that it's met more than just one need as far as education goes, but it also is, I'm hoping we'll give some healthier options, not just pickles, but I'm hoping that it will provide some healthier options for households, as we go into the warmer months or colder months. Sorry. You want to, okay. So I'm sure everyone knows what these are. We are riverine people, and fiddleheads are a food that we have traditionally had for thousands of years. And through these, we really have worked on valuing our food providers. So we have people that harvest them every year. They harvest them for themselves and their families, but they also sell them. And so this year, for the first time, we started purchasing from our own tribal citizens, so that we could actually provide to tribal citizens that don't or aren't able to. So we've given to our elders and other family members who maybe not know how to harvest or just aren't able to. And so with that, we also, they did canning classes, they did education around how to prepare fiddleheads, how to freeze fiddleheads. But these are things that we haven't been able to do on a larger scale in the past. And it really, I'm hoping, for years to come, this will just expand. On top of this, I talk about working with nature as one of those principles of food sovereignty. Not only have we been doing this, but we're also looking at edible landscapes and how we can work with what we already have here on the land. And we're going to be moving some of our, berries, and we're going to be having apple trees and all of that, but we're putting them in places that are more accessible to our community. While we have, I think over 700 people in Aroostook County, we do have a small community that's about 300 right in Holton. So we want to make sure that these things are more accessible to our people, even on foot, so that they can walk out of their home and be able to get these things quite easily. If you want to. Oh,
this is just a link to a video about a mobile food pantry opening. It's a local news website. We can't show the video, but you can see it if you want to see it.
I will add, though, before you go on to the next one, it has nothing to do with the mobile food pantry, but with all of this, we're looking at sustainability as well. So we've hired consultants, and we're looking at business plans and economic development as a way to make this sustainable, successful. We want to be able to provide food, and it's created jobs for people, but we also need to make sure that this is something that doesn't go away. I think it's really important, and that includes, looking at locations. We've found locations where we are able to designate specifically for food and processing food, and And that includes even wild game. So those are things that we're looking at right now.
So I know we only have a couple minutes, and I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I'll run through these slides summarizing the kind of environmental scan survey we did quickly. We did it over a couple months. There were a total of 94 respondents, which was pretty good relative to the size of the community. We didn't use a random sample. It was more of a convenience sample, but the demographics showed that it was fairly representative in terms of age and gender of the population. So I think I was happy to see that. So ask some questions just about access to fresh fruits and vegetables, access to traditional foods, how many people are producing their own food. So this is just about 30% of people are growing their own foods. A big chunk of people aren't. So, in terms of getting garden beds in people's homes or providing opportunities for people to get involved with community gardens, there's sort of a large proportion of people who could be reached through those types of things. Ask some questions about access to traditional food. This just shows sort of the breakdown of where people get more traditional food items such as fiddleheads and those types of things. And so you can see a lot of people, grocery store, people are getting things like squash and corn, makes sense. But also a lot of people, you can see about a 24% here are getting things from home or community garden. So already those efforts are sort of having an impact on providing that sort of availability. Still, people are sharing with friends and family, community events, other tribal members. This sort of shows this, people are growing food and then sharing it with people they know. Farmers market, rivers and woods make sense. So, just sort of to give at a high level, like some ideas of how these things are playing out within the community. This one asked some questions about traditional knowledge, sort of what have you learned, what knowledge has been passed down to you related to food production or gathering or storage, and then have you passed it on? And again, not surprisingly, you see fiddleheads is high on the list, hull corn, hunting, these types of things. Some people talked about specific recipes, specific processes, like the process for making hull corn. Other people just sort of listed ingredients or specific items. But this is sort of just overview of how those responses, all this was sort of open-ended, and then we basically coded it or, categorized it to get some slides, some graphs, some nice sort of graphs out of it. How often are people eating traditional foods, and what are some barriers that prevent people from eating traditional foods? High on that list are things like not knowing where to get not having good recipes, or not having access to ingredients. So these are things that, there are these initiatives in the works to address these specific things. So not that those are great, but it's good to see that, the things that people are saying are an issue are the things that are sort of being worked on to address. Like, I know there's some effort to create some cookbooks or through these online cooking classes that include different recipes. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. So we asked some questions about people's hunting and gathering and fishing knowledge and sort of confidence in their abilities to do these things. You can see a lot of people are spending time fishing and gathering in the, going out into the woods and knowing what they can pick. Hunting, there's still a lot of people that do it, but it's a little bit more of an involved process. I know there are some classes, some online videos being put together to provide some kind of instructional, background information or general knowledge around these things that hopefully make people feel more comfortable doing them, so that if they have an opportunity to go out with some friends or family members or whoever, they might feel a little bit more kind of comfortable knowing what to expect. So that is a very quick overview of that survey. You can see the types of questions we were asking, again, as an environmental scan, just to get an understanding of what people's thinking. I mean, there's more details in the data than that, but just as a quick overview. So I think we have a couple minutes left if there are questions.
Thank you both so much for that great presentation. We've got about 1 minute, and we have a couple questions around the food sovereignty ballot initiative that's coming up. And people are wondering, why would anyone oppose food sovereignty, and what are the barriers that would require a constitutional change?
I have to be completely honest. I didn't realize that there was a food sovereignty issue.
Is it I wasn't aware of that either. There is a state ballot initiative?
Question 3.
Oh, interesting.
Huh. Well,
no, that's all right. So we'll
that.
go for a better one in the last 30
Okay.
seconds. If people are interested in promoting food sovereignty, how do they get involved or go about doing that?
I think that at least as far as the tribes go, the biggest thing is really reaching out. And I would say that each tribe that is doing this is probably doing it, different from another. So understanding that every tribal government and every tribal nation is unique. And so if you'd like to, I think that I would absolutely welcome some outreach, and we can have some conversations about how you could do that. But definitely providing education and just really calling attention to it is a good start. But having those conversations with individual tribal nations is a necessity.
I would just add, it's about building coalitions, building collaborative. It's not about just having a food pantry and having community gardens. It's about how those things integrate and how the community gardens are producing food that makes its way into the food pantry and then gets distributed to the community that way. So it's putting everything together and aligning things around this broader idea. And to the first question, I don't know why someone would oppose it. I don't know what the downside is.
Great, thank you both. And it is unfortunately time to end the conversation. I always hate to have to play that role because this is such an important topic, but really want to thank you both for being here. To those of you who are attending, please don't forget to complete the evaluation. We'll take a short break and be back in about 8 minutes to continue hearing another presentation on food policy. So we hope you will join us then. Thank you all.
Thank you.